Question 1, is the graph exponential growth or decay? So if you read it from left to right, you will see that it's growing, so we're going to say it's exponential growth. Give an estimate, question 2, on where the graph crosses the y-axis. So here's your y-axis right here. It crosses the y down here. We'll say that's probably about negative, we'll say it's negative 4.25. We're just going to give a little estimate there. Question 3, give an estimate on where the 0 is located. The 0 is where it crosses the x-axis. So it crosses the x-axis right here. We'll say that's probably around 4.75, something like that. Number 4, draw the horizontal asymptote. So the horizontal asymptote, that is going to be the imaginary line that the graph looks like it's sitting on. And this imaginary line here, or we'll say invisible line, this is, if you read it from right to left as the graph is going down here, it's approaching this horizontal asymptote, but it'll never touch that. So that's what the horizontal asymptote is. What is the equation for that? It's y equals, and it's where it crosses the y-axis. So down here it crosses at -5. And you could actually put that in your calculator if you needed to. So I could go over here and do y equals -5. And you'll see, I'm zoomed out here, so let me go back to a zoom standard. And you'll see that you have a horizontal line here that crosses at -5. So that's an easy way to confirm what the equation for the asymptote is. Let's talk about domain. Domain is dealing with all of the x values that the graph will travel through. And since there are arrows on the end of the graph, that means that the graph is going to break through. And so I drew those little, we call them little fences there, try to trap that graph on the x-axis, and you can't do that. The graph keeps going. So the domain is all real numbers. However, the range, notice that the asymptote helps you determine the range here. The range is going to be above -5, so it's greater than -5. And so there we go. Here we go. Now we have a quadratic. Let's take a look at 1 through 4. What are the x-intercept solutions, roots, and zeros? Well, guess what? These are all the same. These have the same definition. And since they have the same definition, that means they are all x-intercepts. Here are our x-intercepts. So that means that it is at -4 and 2. You could also write them as coordinates if you wanted to. You could say it's at -4, 0, and 2, 0. X-intercept, solutions, roots, zeros, that means those definitions are the same for each one of those. So let's jump down to number 5. Is the vertex, this is your vertex right here. That is the top part of the graph. Is that a maximum or a minimum? It's a maximum. And I know that because if you're on a roller coaster here, right, here's your little roller coaster car. I know what you're saying. I'm an artist. Right? This would be the tallest point or the highest point on the graph, so our vertex would be at -1, 9. The y-intercept is where it crosses the y-axis. It crosses the y-axis right here. So that means it crosses at 8 on the y, or you could actually give it a coordinate, 0, 8. Is the parabola number 8, is the parabola opening up or down? Well, it has some arrows right here. So if I draw those arrows, it is opening down. Draw a dash, number 9, draw a dashed line where the axis of symmetry is located. The axis of symmetry is an invisible line, or you could say it's an imaginary line that splits something perfectly in half on both sides. So there's our axis of symmetry. But if you notice about the axis of symmetry, it is a vertical line. And if you think of Slope Dude's course, there were 4 little individual pieces of his course. There was positive, there was negative, there was 0, and then at the very end, there's undefined. And so like what I like to do is think of an undefined line as kind of a weird equation. Instead of saying it starts with y equals, we'll say that the undefined lines start with x equals. Or another thing that you can help you remember is the word axis has the letter x in it. So we would say it starts with x equals. And then you just simply look, where does it cross the x-axis? It crosses the x-axis at -1. Question 10, what is the domain? So going back to our previous problem, if I try to, and domain deals with the x direction, if I try to draw a fence here on the x-axis and draw a little fence over here, notice that this is just going to keep going. It's going to break out. That means that it's going to travel in the x direction for all real numbers. However, the range, we can put a ceiling up here. It does not go above that. It actually will stay below this line right here. And that maximum part is at 9. So that means the graph is going to be less than or equal to 9. And we're talking about the y.